everyone, it's Christine from the Door Doctor, and today we're going to be making a super simple, very cute Halloween wreath. I personally like to decorate for Halloween, but I don't like to spend a lot of time making wreaths for the holiday because blink and it's over with before you know it. So hopefully this wreath will fit the bill. It's pretty straightforward and easy. We'll go through in 3 parts. Part 1, all the supplies that you're going to need and the approximate quantities. Part 2, we'll be walking through how to make the petal for this flower wreath and applying it to our wreath frame. And then part 3 should be quick too. It'll be wrapping our wreath with some ribbon and topping it with this very cute flower clip. So really simple and easy wreath. All right, so part 1. So for supplies, you're going to need an 8-inch in diameter Dollar Tree wreath frame. Let me move some of this black out of the way here. Certainly you could make this using a larger wreath frame. You're just going to simply need a little bit more mesh to complete the wreath. We're not going to be applying any plastic mesh in the middle like I do for a lot of my flower wreaths because we're just going to be applying petals to the outer rim, and it's just going to be 1 row of petals, so pretty easy. So you just need your wreath frame. For mesh, I'm going to be using poly burlap mesh in 2 different colors. So we're going to be alternating black solid poly burlap mesh with this poly burlap mesh that has almost like a little glittery tinsel woven in there in colors of orange, green, and purple. I cut already these squares into 10 by 10 inch squares. The poly burlap comes in a 10-inch wide roll that's 10 yards in total. So each roll, depending on how well you cut them, you'll end up with 30 to 35 squares. For this wreath, I prepared by having about, let's see, if you're going to be using an 8-inch wreath frame, probably want to have at least 10 of both the solid black and the stripe. That might get modified as we move along, but we'll see. It depends really on how tightly you want them packed on the wreath frame. If you're using fabric mesh or deco mesh, those tend to be thinner meshes, and so you can push the petals closer and you might need a higher quantity of squares. You're going to need some zip ties to apply all your petals. I prefer 8-inch zip ties that I buy in bulk on Amazon. I also have a couple of black zip ties that are a little bit shorter. This is, so we can use them when we're finishing the wreath. I will get to that a little bit later. Some sort of decorative accent that you're going to apply to the wreath. This one I believe I bought it was either Dollar Tree or Michael's. It was, about a year or 2 ago. Has a nice clip on the back, so we're just going to simply clip it to our wreath. And then you'd like to have, this is a 12-inch black pipe cleaner, so you can attach a loop to the back of your wreath. And then this 2.5-inch wired ribbon. This is just a black glitter ribbon. I also purchased this on Amazon. You're going to use this to cover the I would say the zip ties and where you attach the petals to your wreath frame. I have about 2.5 yards right here. Fingers crossed that this gets all the way around the wreath. You might want to have 3 yards just to be on the safe side. All right, so let me clear off all of this. We're going to start making our petals next. So you're going to want to have your wreath frame, your cut mesh squares, and your zip ties ready for the next part. All right, welcome back. So time to place petals on our wreath frame. And this should be pretty simple to do. Like I mentioned before, we're going to alternate solid black with the striped poly burlap mesh. And we're going to apply the petals to not the inner wire, not the outer wire, but this second one right in the middle. And these 8-inch wreath frames are sectioned into 3 sections total. I think each section is going to take about 6 petals, but I might be wildly off about that. So we'll have to see as we go along. But you're going to alternate each color petal. So let me just first place my zip tie there. Stick that off to the side. Take my mesh. We'll start with the stripe mesh. And this is a super easy petal. So what I think, because one side is purple, one side is orange, each time I make one of these, I'm going to alternate which color is closest to me. So we'll start with purple closest to me. Cut edges are up the side of your square. The seamed edges are facing towards you. I'm going to take this corner here. This is lower left for me. and I'm going to bring it to meet the opposite corner and just fold that into a nice big triangle. All right, and then quite simply, you're going to gather the triangle from the base to the peak. You could do about 4 gathers, okay? And then I always think that looks like a mustache, so it looks sort of like a mustache. And then before you apply this to your wreath, I usually like to flip it over, hold this right-hand side down, and then fold the mustache in half, if you will. Okay, so take it, fold it in half, and then you're going to want to pinch the folded part in between your 2 fingers there, or in between your dominant hand. And when you fold it, you don't want one side perfectly covering the other. You want it splayed so that you get a look at both colors like that. Flip it around there too. All right, we're just going to zip tie that right onto our wreath. Actually, I'm going to put the zip tie here. Start in this section. We're going to work clockwise around. So there's 1 zip tied petal. Let me cut the zip tie there. Okay, so that's number 1. We're going to finish that or follow that with a black petal. So same technique, cut sides of your square up the sides here, seamed edge towards you, take the left lower corner, bring it up to meet the opposite corner, fold that into a nice large triangle, then gather your triangle from the base to the peak. And then I sort of flip it, hold this half, fold it. Sometimes it takes a second to really grasp it here at the folded portion. And then we're going to apply that to our frame, to that second piece of wire. Okay. And I just like to always make sure I like positioning before I tighten that zip tie. And now we're going to do the striped mesh again. And this time, let's see how this looks if I start with the orange facing me. First, make your large triangle, fold it, gather it from the base to the peak, flip it there, fold it, and carefully grab it. Now, certainly you could do this all with the striped poly burlap mesh. I was just quite honestly running low on that particular mesh, so I'm adding a little black in there. And there you go, that's 3 petals so far. And I think, as I mentioned before, I thought 6, but I think that's going to be wildly off. I think we're going to be able to fold, or rather add many more than just 6 petals here. So I'll have to increase my numbers. But as you can see, I'm keeping them all pretty tightly pushed together here. All right, so another black petal, fold your triangle, gather across the middle, flip it, bend it, pinch it, and then zip tie. I think we'll finish this whole section together, and then we'll have a sense of how many zip ties in total you're going to need per section. All right, next zip tie, I'm going to start with the purple. So fold your triangle, gather across the base, flip, hold it, bend, give it a good pinch. Losing my zip tie. All right, another black. So fold your triangle, gather from the base to the tip, flip it over, made this wreath long ago in black and white for Halloween. It had a Jack Skellington Nightmare Before Christmas sort of feel to it. It was really cute. So you can definitely get creative. All right, so let's see. We'll try another orange stripe closest to me. See if we can get everything in frame here. Fold your large triangle, gather from the base to the peak, flip it over, hold this part, fold it, pinch it at the fold, and then zip tie up. So let's see, I'm going to take a step back here and see if this feels like enough. The one thing you don't want to do is you do want to have a little bit of space in between each one of these, because at some point you're going to be wrapping ribbon around them, and it'll make it a little bit harder to wrap the ribbon if they're too close together. The way this stands, this is 7, so that would be 21 total. I'd like to have even numbers for this, simply because you're alternating 2 different color meshes. So I think I'm going to try to squeeze one more black petal in here, and that'll mean that we'll do 8 per section, not the 6 per section that I mentioned before. Might be a little tight squeeze, but we'll work it out here. All right, so final black petal for this section. You could use black zip ties for all of this. If you have them on hand, that's certainly fine. You're going to be covering this with ribbon, so you shouldn't see the white zip ties. And for the purpose of a tutorial, I think the white is a little bit easier to see, but certainly you could use black. All right, so here we go with 8 petals so far. So I think that would mean that you'd need 24 total for filling in the next 2 sections, 12 of the stripe and 12 of the solid black mesh. So I'm going to move on and continue and finish the next 2 sections, and then when we come back, it'll be all about finishing your wreath. All right, welcome back. So part 2 is complete. All our petals are applied. I ended up using 24 petals. So that's 12 of the striped mesh, 12 of the solid black mesh, and each section on this wreath, I used 8 petals total. All right, finished diameter for this will be about 20 inches wide. So it's a intermediate sized wreath. I think if you used a 12-inch wreath frame for this, certainly you'd need more petals than we use today. The dimension would be about 24 inches in diameter. I've made wreaths about that size before. What's nice about this wreath is hard to show you on screen, but it's fairly flat. And so if you have a storm door and you don't have much space to squeeze in a wreath between your storm door and your outer, porch door, this should fit nicely. All right, so next section is going to be applying our hanger, applying the ribbon so that it covers these zip ties. And then, for me, it's just going to be simply adding this clip at the end, but you could get creative and add all sorts of little picks and decoration to your wreath if you prefer. So let's first start. I think we're going to use our pipe cleaner and add our hanger first. So I'm going to flip our wreath over, and I'm going to find one of these little crossbars here. If you can see that there, one of those crossbars just to anchor the hanger. Not necessary though, you could place it anywhere. And how I make my hangers, if you've watched any of my tutorials, is I'll take our 12-inch pipe cleaner. First I'll fold it in half into a V, and then I'll fold each of these little legs again so that she looks like a letter W, and the peak of the W is going to be the tip of your loop, if you will. And so you're going to take this W and take the loop of it and stick it underneath the outer wire of your frame. Boy, it's hard to really see this when everything is black, but hopefully you can see that that guy went underneath this frame, and then you have these 2 legs from the W that are just sort of hanging around here, and you're going to take each leg and bend it behind the tip or the peak of the W. So we'll do one that way, the other leg goes behind it the other way. I bring them in front, grab the loop, grab the little free legs and pull, okay? And you'll see that you have these still hanging here and then this nice little loop at the top. And then usually what I like to do is, just because there's extra pipe cleaner, I like to wrap it around again. I come around the front here, under the wire frame, pull it tight, and then you're gonna wanna hide these a little bit. So I'm just gonna go to the inside, the inner wire of the frame, and wrap them around as much as I can until they're pretty snug. It's certainly not gonna fall off. All right, I'll show that a little closer. All right, so there's your hanger. And now we're gonna start with our wired ribbon. This is 2.5 inch wired ribbon. You can certainly use something more narrow. I like the 2.5 inches because it gives you enough width so that you can wrap it around the head of these petals and cover the zip ties pretty easily. I've unspooled the 2.5 yards because you're gonna have to be looping this around a really tight area, so it can't be on the roll. We're starting with 2.5 yards. I think this will last long enough, but we'll have to make adjustments if it doesn't reach all the way around. You're going to be pulling it pretty tightly, so I think it should. And so unspool 2.5 yards. We're going to start by zip tying this to the back of our wreath. I'm going to use a different crossbar than the one that we used for our hanger here. And I'm going to, since this is a one-sided ribbon, there's only the decorative side on one side, I'm going to have the glitter facing down for right now, and I'm just going to stick my zip tie under this crossbar and zip tie my ribbon on there. My hands will cooperate. I'm going to have a lot of glitter on my hands. All right, there we go. Just to anchor that there. See a little anchor. And then you're going to take your ribbon and bring it to the front of the wreath, and we'll flip the whole thing over, okay? There's going to be a lot of this, a lot of pulling through, wrapping around. And so you've got your ribbon in the front now, and you're going to pick the closest petal head. I'm going to pick this striped one right here, and you're just simply going to take your ribbon, loop it around the top of it, and stick it in between the second wire and the outer wire on your frame. And like I said, this is why it can't be spooled, because you're going to be carefully threading this with each of these petals. So I'm going to, see if I can show this a little closer. I'm going to thread it in between where the petal is zip tied and the outer part of the frame. I'm just gonna have to keep pulling it. Be careful though, because you don't, number one, want to get the ribbon too twisted, which I think I've already done, but also you don't want to disrupt the poly burlap, mesh too much, because we know poly burlap can fray. And this ribbon is very pretty. I like the glitter, but it's pretty stiff, and so it's not going to want to come through quite as easily as I might like. All right, so there we go. I'm going to untwist it. It's going to look like it's like a little nubbin of black glitter. And you can tuck it so that all of your loose pieces of mesh are kind of hidden. All right, and then it's going to look like that. All right, covered your zip tie. It doesn't have to be super straight. And then you're going to pull this whole thing through the middle again, and then get ready to do it 23 more times and go all the way around. So we'll work counterclockwise here. Like I said, I think you're pulling it pretty tightly, so I think 2.5 yards should be enough. All right, so we're going to push this other, that's actually easier to see. So I push my petals apart so that you can see I'm going to come up through the middle, and this is where you attached your petals. I'm going to go over that wire and under the outside wire. And then pull it through. And before you tighten it completely, make sure your ribbon is straightened out. Okay. And then make sure it's over the zip tie and it's more, you know, it doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but that you like the way it looks. Black is very forgiving for this wreath. That's why I chose the black solid glitter ribbon. And so there's number 2. All right. And then we'll push this guy over, pull everything through the middle, and we'll do a third one together. Don't worry, I'm not going to do all 24 on screen. That would be quite boring. All right, so here you've got your ribbon again. You're going to go over, so you're underneath the inner wire. And you're going to go over the second wire here and pull it through. All right, let me just untwist my glitter ribbon and then slowly tighten it there. And let's make sure it's got the zip tie all the way. All right, and so you're going to do that all the way around, so all 24 zip ties. It does help to push this over a little bit to create a little space in between as you're doing it. So I'm going to finish by working my way all the way around, and then when I get to number 24, we'll come back, we'll attach our final sort of finishes and zip tie the end of that ribbon. All right, I'm back, and I have just enough ribbon left over to finish this 24th petal, or covering this 24th petal. So 2.5 yards is probably more than enough, especially if you pull it pretty taut. All right, so that was my last zip tie, and I'll pull it over here. And then if I could find my black zip ties, this is why the black color is, I think, good for this. There's a crossbar right here, and I think I will simply attach the ribbon with a zip tie or fasten it here. This little loose end that you finish with. And then you should be able to cut it. Tuck any extra that you don't want anybody to see. Like I'll have a small amount left. Get rid of that. I think, you know, you could, I'm just going to cut off and leave about 2 inches maybe. And then take this and sort of thread it. I think I'm going to thread it backwards underneath this last bit of ribbon, just so it's tucked in and more or less out of the way. All right, on the back you can see some of the white zip ties, so I mean you could always go back and add a little felt covering if you wanted, glue that on, or like I mentioned before, if you have black zip ties and you really want this to all be covered, you could use the black zip ties too. All right, and so let's turn her around. This is where my hanging loop is. And then I think I'm just gonna place my little flower here on the side. I'm just gonna attach it to one of my ribbons here. Certainly you could wire this in for a little bit more security, but it's pretty simple to do it this way. And she looks pretty cute. And so that's all it is. So this is a good base, I think, if you wanna get creative and add a little bit more, you know, in terms of the ribbon color, in terms of the little finishes on the side, really spice it up. I think it'd be pretty, but it'll make a beautiful addition to your home for Halloween. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'll have more to come. Have a good day.